the Equitable's neighboring buildings were considerably smaller. And in the narrow roads in South Manhattan, its arrival was not well received.
Depending on the time of the day, almost a 4-block area of lower rise and older buildings had been cast into the shadow of this titanic structure, stealing their light, stealing the value of the sunlight that was used to illuminate the space. Lights at that time, the bulbs of lights burned very hot, and they didn't really give off very much light. So light was a heat generator. Windows had to open in order to ventilate the space. So buildings were much more dependent on natural sunlight and the wind in order to create a habitable workspace.
Manhattan therefore had to find a way of building higher without upsetting neighboring buildings. And it was George Burdett Ford who found the solution. His idea was city planning regulations, which were adopted in 1916, and these were his instructions. First of all, vertically, you could build the equivalent of the width of the street or avenue bordering the building. Then you draw a straight line from the middle of the road. That way, you get a base structure which you can build on, but with setbacks. Depending on the neighborhood, residential or commercial, the main facade would sit at various heights. And one last feature was that on 25% of the plot, you could build as high as you wanted. This was the recipe behind the Empire State Building and hundreds of other skyscrapers in Manhattan.
And although this is purely a sort of technical formula that's about preserving light and air, one of the interesting things is very quickly it helps give shape to a whole new style of architecture in the city, a kind of ziggurat style of architecture.
Those kinds of recessive mountain or cliff-like projections give this very distinctive New York look, the zigzag that really kind of has a jazz age quality, because the way that light and shadow begin to develop in those right-angled spaces get a kind of frenetic energy that you see when you see it in black and white photography and when you see it in shade and shadow in the city.
Many of Manhattan's most famous buildings were the result of the 1916 regulation. They all seem to be part of the same family, and yet they're all different. 120 Wall Street with its stair-like shape. The New York Telephone Building and its unorganized silhouette. The American Radiator Building and its step-back roof. Or even the Chrysler Building and its rocket-shaped roof. These were all built within the space of around 15 years. Meanwhile, America was undergoing a period of huge economic growth in the wake of the First World War. Dozens of buildings were now transforming Manhattan's urban skyline, thus making it instantly distinguishable from others.